Darren, what a great guest. How you feeling?
Oh my gosh, I took notes the whole time, and I know like I
Yeah.
edit this podcast, so I very easily could have been doing that after the show. But I was just enamored with everything he was saying, the quotes, the one-liners, the insights. I think he's just got such a different perspective into our industry because of the work he's doing, diving into data and looking at what's true. And that to me is like my biggest takeaway. Like, I want to be in alignment with what is true. This is Truly Independent, a show that demystifies the indie film journey by documenting the process of releasing independent films in theaters. Each week, Garrett Batty and I, Darren Smith, will update you on our journey, bringing guests to share their insights into the process and answer your questions. Today on the show, we have the man, the myth, the legend, Stephen Follows is joining us on Truly Independent. He has 4 things that filmmakers can learn from the data. And you will not want to miss this episode. Get your notebooks out, get ready to take notes, because this one is jam-packed. This is Truly Independent, episode 24. All right. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Garrett, how you doing?
Darren? Good, man. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. I am so excited today because this is.
Are you blushing?
I might be
blushing.
flush. I might be a little. I might have even a tear in my eye. I don't know. We are joined by a guest that I am just so thoroughly excited for. Stephen Follows, who I've mentioned no less than a dozen times on this podcast, is joining us today on the show. My goodness, Stephen, welcome to Truly Independent.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for promoting my work, and it's such a lovely welcome. Yeah, I'm very, very glad to be here.
Thank you.
Now, Stephen, you're based on your accent, you are not local to within this Utah County area.
Damn, I was hoping to pass as a Mormon. No, I'm British, I'm afraid, and that's the British way of, we have to apologize as well as identifying ourselves.
Well,
but no, I'm based in London. Yeah.
I think that's the most ironic sentence that's ever been uttered on this podcast. I interrupted you. Where are you?
No, I'm based in London, and so I've taught around the world. I had a repeating bits of work I was doing at NYU, and I've taught at different film schools and places around the world. But I'd always end up back in London, it seems. So.
Amazing. Well, I wonder if the weather is the same there as it is today here. It's rainy and cloudy, and every time I've been over to London, that's how I would describe it.
Yeah. The main difference is that we're coming now into the fall and the winter, which means that it's going to be exactly the same, but less bright for less often.
Okay.
So imagine what you've got now, but darker.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being here. And yes, Darren has fangirled over you, and he's turned me into a fan. And so we hope to just talk for as long as you can stay with us, and we'll just talk about all the information. You can just offload everything you've learned. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Happy to.
Stephen, why don't we begin by giving the audience a little bit more context as to what you do and the work that you're up to, and then we can really dive into our discussion today.
Yeah, really happy to. So where I've ended up is doing a number of different things. And so depending on how people meet me, when I tell them whatever the other things I do, they're like, how did you end up doing that? But for me, it's all the same journey in the sense that I want to understand how the world works and then share it with other people for them to make their art and their creative journeys. So one thing I do that isn't massively related to film, or kind of was, but isn't any so much anymore, is I run a company that raises money for charities using storytelling. So we make TV commercials, but also do strategy and things like that for some of the biggest charities in the world, in the UK. And so UNICEF and Greenpeace and Amnesty and people like that. And so I was the creative director. I set it up. I was the creative director for 10 years. And now I call myself the head of innovation, which gives myself a bit more time to do other things. But that started as a production company when I went to film school and I stepped up a production company. And it sort of evolved over the last 15 years or so to become more about storytelling and more about fundraising. But as it moved away from film, like properly making any movies, a part of me, it was the right thing for the company and it was the right thing for the work we were doing. But there was a part of me that's always one that is a filmmaker that identifies with the indie film community. And so I wanted to have a place still there. And I also wasn't using a part of my brain, which I quite enjoy, which is to run through stats and data and sort of try and understand how things work. So I started blogging about data within the film industry, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. I was just sharing stuff that I thought was interesting, and it kind of evolved and grew, and not many other people are doing what I'm doing. So there's a lot of space. There's a lot of new ideas. I'm like, oh, no one's done that. That's really fun. And it's sort of evolved into sort of trying to understand the film world through the lens of data, but also as a filmmaker. So I'm not looking for a magic formula. I don't think there is one. When I was teaching at NYU, there was a day where I was teaching at the film school and also at the business school at Stern, so at Tisch and Stern. And somebody asked me, what are you doing today? And I said, oh, I'm teaching filmmakers how to use data and lawyers how not to. And I was like, actually, yeah, that is kind of my thing. If you come to me as a data person, I'm like, it's an art. And if you come to me as a pure artist, I'm like, you really should look at the data. So I'm kind of a contrarian in whoever's there. So and then since then I do things like I work for Guinness World Records. It's a side gig, which I absolutely love, coming up with new movie or doing the research for new movie records. And I've recently published a whole report about horror films. So that whole, I don't know which bit of that is most relevant to each of your audiences, but data and film is probably the lens in which you know me.
All of the above.
Indeed.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that is really how I came across your work years and years and years ago, and why I'm so excited to chat with you today, because I do think there is a huge benefit to helping independent filmmakers understand the business through that lens of data. And there's no one better on the planet than you at that work. And so I'm aspiring, but I'm, a couple orders of magnitude below where you're at on that.
Well, we all have different skills. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
We all have different places to be. And some people will lead with their stories and need the support from people who can do the data. And some people like me have got data, but don't have an agenda. And I think that's one of the strongest things about the work I do, is that I don't mind what you make. I want you to choose what you make. But if you're going to make it, I want to help you as much as I can. And I wanted the best chance of getting it funded, made, and seen.
Amazing. I think we are all in alignment on that goal. So with that in mind, with the invitation to come on the show is really around what are a couple of things that independent filmmakers can and maybe even should learn from the data. If you look over your career doing this work and diving into so many data points, and you had a handful of them that you sent back to me. And so I just kind of want to give you the floor a little bit and set us up with, here's something someone can learn, and then we'll ask questions and dive deeper on it, and we can just go until you no longer want to talk to us.
It'll take a while. I've got a lot of time for filmmakers, and I really do want to use my skills and my way of seeing the world to help empower others. It was such a great invitation, because you said, have some thinking, put some thought into what the wider trends that you see and the patterns you see with filmmakers, and what advice would you give? And I really like that, because each of my 400 or 500 articles I've written over the years have been hyper specific. They really sort of like, do filmmakers run second crowdfunding campaigns? They're unbelievably narrow. But across all of them, and in my time teaching at film schools and meeting filmmakers, there are sort of wider lessons that I've learned. None of them are kind of prescriptive. And like with anything, screenwriting is probably the best example. There are so many formulas, Save the Cat and Truby and all that stuff. And it's really important you read them, but then it's important you drop them and do your own thing, and you take on the bits that make sense. So everything I'm about to say, please, you and the audience, take on what you want, but you don't even have to reject what you don't want. You can just go, thank you for telling me. And you then sort of put it into your own mix. But the first thing I was thinking about was something that actually relates to what I just said, which is that you do really need to understand what's come before, but you also should feel free to ignore it. The key is that they should be conscious choices. So I haven't quite got this into like a neat phrase, so it may take me a bit of time to get there. But it's something around understanding the expectations that your audience have, which might be your literal audience, the human beings in the cinema, or on the couch or whatever. But it also might be the third parties, the sales agents, the distributors, the press, anyone, any gatekeeper, anyone you have to deal with. They are your audience. And arguably, if you're selling it through the traditional methods, you never meet your audience. You never sell to your audience, because you're getting a minimum guarantee from a sales agent or a distributor or exhibitor or whatever. So it's a bit different nowadays with self-distribution and with people having connections via Patreon or subscriptions, or even just Substack or anything where you have a connection with your audience. But let's use the phrase audience here to mean anyone that you're having to deliver to and is a gatekeeper in some way. They have a set of expectations based on what's happened before. What does work, what doesn't work. If you say it's X, they'll think it's got ABC in it. Like if you say it's a horror, they'll expect this kind of emotional experience. And so you really need to know what those expectations are by looking at the data and looking at past examples, not just the 3 or 4 that you like or that your cousin made or that you've seen. It needs to be something wider than that. You really need to have an awareness of what are their expectations. But that's just part one. Part two is you then have to choose whether you're going to deliver or subvert that. And you can do either. That's where the art comes in. If you deliver on 100% of them, you're going to make the most generic chat GPT down the line dross that no one's going to care and it's not really going to do very well. But if you subvert everything, you're not making a film. You know, if you submit something that's 43 minutes long, no one's going to know what to do with that. So in each case, think about what is about delivering and meeting these expectations and what is subverting it. And do each of those jobs incredibly well. But almost say to yourself, I mean, I haven't quite got a workflow that you can do. There's no Stephen method, but if there were one, it would be along the lines of, you know, write down all the areas, write down in another column all the expectations, and then under a next column you write, I will meet this by doing this, this, and this. I will subvert this because, you know, in this way I will make this funny and it's not normally, or whatever it might be. So I think the first thing for me is understand what's come before, but then consciously choose to ignore things because that's who you are, that's your art, that's your voice. I don't know if that makes any sense to you guys.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's very applicable, honestly, to a movie we just released in theaters, a faith-based movie on 500 screens that has heavy metal music in it. So it's very much like understanding what, and that's been my genre, and I've studied that for years. So my question to you is, how does a filmmaker? I mean, there is an endless amount of films or of quote unquote what's come before, right?
Mm-hmm.
In whatever the genre is, or style, or independent category there is. At what point do you feel like, okay, I now understand what has come before? You know, do I look at 3 movies? Do I look at 10 movies?
Yeah. It's tricky because it's a really good question. It comes down most specifically when people have to find comps, you know, comparative films, and they say, okay, this film was made with a similar sort of audience and a similar budget, and it did this much money. And quite often people are doing that just to prove something to investors. So they're not finding comparable film; they're finding huge successes that they can say are comparable. Whereas actually,
selective comparables.
Exactly. I mean, I can tell you the Blair Witch is on everyone's list. Maybe now it's Paranormal Activity.
Napoleon Dynamite's the one for us. It was like, oh,
there we go. Yeah,
that film made 45 million.
That film is where it's been mentioned the most, is in business plans, I think. But that's okay, because that's, you know, illustrating the high end of something and the lottery win. That's fine. That's reasonable, as long as that's how it's framed. Like, this has happened. It's a fact. But there isn't a magic number, and I think that also, even if you were to watch every film ever, which wouldn't be possible, it wouldn't be relevant necessarily, because you've got to discount lots of films because that was a different time, different budget. It is much more of a feeling. And so I would suggest that you've done enough that you could look yourself in the mirror and say, I've properly done this, because you usually know you haven't done enough.
Yeah.
But also you've investigated every area there is. So you've done the Googling, you've asked ChatGPT, you've gone to film festivals, you've met audiences, you've asked somebody in Starbucks, you've gone to you've watched other films that the same audience want that are in other genres. I think this is the thing about independent film. No one's giving you permission, because you don't need permission. But you are your own judge. You know full well whether you've done enough research or not. And you can lie to everybody else, but you know full well in your own soul. And if you're going to do all of this project, spend years and years and other people's money and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, and then it goes wrong, are you going to be able to look back and say, you know what, I did everything I could? Or are you going to look back and go, I cut some corners? Yeah. That's it. Like, it's not for me or anyone else to police or tell you that you're a grown-up and you're responsible for what happens. You can't guarantee success, but you can certainly guarantee that you don't feel bad if it's not a success.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like that's not the world we're in. There isn't a prescriptive number. There isn't a formula. This is about you looking yourself in the eye and saying, have I done enough to protect myself, but also the people I will recruit? I will take someone else's money. I will tell other people to work for, you know, crazy hard for poor returns. I will tell people to give me $10 in 2 hours. Am I treating that with the respect it deserves? And if you are, then great, you are. And you'll do some things wrong and you'll learn it, whatever. But if you're not, you know full well you're not. And go ahead, feel free, cut corners. I don't care. But you are gonna suffer from that. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that response, and I I think I come to that question from the side of too much, like knowing too much and get this paralysis by analysis,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
That's true.
inability to move forward and go, you know what? At some point, like you say, nobody's giving me permission. Just do it. Like take that leap. You do. You can look yourself in the mirror and say, you know everything there is to know right now about what your target is and where you've been, and you just got to sprint now. Now it's time to sprint.
Yeah.
I say, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think there isn't a right time. If you wait for the perfect time, it's like trying to find the right time to buy a new piece of technology. There's never a good time. It'll get cheaper and a newer version will come out, but then it's 6 months later, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it is a balance between those two competing things, which is it's better you do it now than you wait till it's perfect. But at the same time, don't be slapdash about it.
Amazing.
And I think you are your own judge with that. And I don't know. I think that you can hold yourself to account.
So a takeaway for me on this was, if you're making those decisions out of subversion, then that's okay, and you can be judged accordingly, whether the audience liked it or the gatekeepers liked it or not. But if you're making it out of ignorance because you didn't put in the time and effort to do the research, to understand the genre conventions, to understand what the audience is expecting, then that's on you for kind of going at it a little lazy. There's a
100%. Like that's what your art is. Your art is your series of choices over a long period of time. That's it.
Yeah. There's a great resource that I've loved in my, career as a filmmaker. There's a book by Sean Coyne called The Story Grid. And I think you guys are the same ilk because he's very data driven. He was a book editor for 25 years and partners with Stephen Pressfield, who wrote War of Art and a bunch of other books, and really takes that same approach of you need to know the genre expectations and the conventions and what the expectations are from the audience, or you're going to let them down and then your thing's not going to work. So I support that approach.
Yeah. And it's completely fine to do things differently. And you just have to know that you're doing that. And so to loop back to what you were asking before, there isn't a magic number of films to watch, but you should feel like you've watched a fair amount. And the real test is whether you can chat with the audience members. And so I can't remember who told me this, but a long time ago, someone told me when it comes to pitching screenwriting ideas, you've got an idea for a movie, pitch people in Starbucks and see if you can get in the queue and see if you can get their attention and keep their attention. And I don't know whether people actually do that or not. I think you should. I'm not sure I've got the balls to do that. But if you were to do that, it would be a very real test. But you can do that now in other ways. You could put out some Facebook ads for a movie that doesn't exist. You're not going to transfer, you're not taking anyone's credit card details. You're not doing anything nefarious, but you can do a bit of testing. And you could learn a lot from, there's the Lean Startup, which is a Silicon Valley style, how they deal with creating startups of new technologies that don't exist. We wouldn't copy the exact model, but they do talk about how you could test whether an idea, your theory is that this horror film is such a good idea that everyone will buy it just on the idea. Well, mock up a poster, put it on Facebook and see how many people click on it. And if no one does, you have to explain that somehow to yourself. And if loads of people do, great, you've got a data point and you can be like, I just did this little test, or I did a short film, or I talked to my audience, or whatever it might be. But action is better than nothing, I think.
What are there resources for data as well? We've talked about watching films and kind of looking at that, but aside from Box Office Mojo, where might an independent film go to say a filmmaker go to say, hey, I want to create some comps. Now I've watched a lot of films and kind of know what I want to create. I need to deliver some comps and actual information to my investors.
I think one of the hard things to deal with is the fact that most films shouldn't exist. And I'm not saying that I don't want them to. I'm just saying that there isn't, like, people frame it as if there is a place they should be able to go that can prove that they're right.
Yeah.
That's not the case. But that doesn't mean you still shouldn't do it, because the point is your passion and you should make it. Films aren't inherently good or bad, or inherently should or shouldn't be made. You make it real or not. So the sad answer to that is there isn't a place you can put it in, get the answer you want, copy and paste it, put it in your plan and move on. Because not only does that place not exist, it also probably wouldn't prove your film. But then again, almost all, Napoleon Dynamite's a terrible idea to make. What an awful idea and yet massive success, and good luck to them. So there's no secret site. Obviously, if you have money, you can, like, for example, if you have hundreds of dollars to spend on comps, you can go to the Numbers website, the-numbers.com, and they have a professional comp analysis where they've done all sorts of estimates, and you pay them $100 or so per film comp, and they'll give you all the breakdown and stuff. You should do that. That's great.
Yeah.
But that's above and beyond most filmmakers, partly because we don't have the money, but also because you might be developing 4 or 5 films. And if you have 10 comps, you're spending thousands of dollars straight away. But you can look at what films are recommended. You can read the reviews, see what the audiences recommend. Our recommendation algorithms are getting better and better. So if you look through all the different sites like, Letterboxd or wherever else, Movie Insider, and see what they recommend when you find some of the films. And then you sort of try and think about what's a comparable film for your audience. So it's not necessarily this has the same actor in it, because the actor may have played lots of different genres or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, what is a comparable experience for that audience member who's like, okay, we're going to watch movie A tonight, right? Everyone ready? We're all on the couch. Let's hit play. Oh, it's not available. What else are they going to watch? What's the emotional experience that's a substitute? And that might be the same budget range, but it might not be. And certainly some things in some genres are more important. So if it's a religious film, it's going to be far more important to its religious quality. Whereas if it's horror comedy versus a comedy horror, it may not make any difference, because they fundamentally want to be a bit scared and have a bit of fun. So there's no shortcut to the grind of watching the trailers, going through IMDb, clicking through the journey, going on Reddit, searching, asking on Reddit as well. I really loved X, Y, and Z. Can anyone tell me some other comparable films? You have to invent that journey. And filmmakers don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Nobody runs away to do the funding for the circus. And so nobody wants to do this. But this is just hard work you have to do. Tough. Like, I just don't have much sympathy for, like, just go and try and you'll get it wrong, but it doesn't matter. And then you'll look back and be like, oh, actually, you know what? I do know this genre. I do know this audience. I have seen the films and I can speak eloquently about them. That's it. It's just not very sexy or easy.
Amazing. Well,
yeah. So
I think it's you've given us a lot already. So I do want to. I know you've got 2 or 3 other ideas or takeaways.
I got 3 more. Yeah.
So let's hop to the next one. But my goodness, this is awesome.
No, I'm more than happy to. So I think, and this actually flows quite nicely from what you were just asking. The films are an emotional experience, not an intellectual experience. This is my theory. Some films can be intellectual, and documentaries are a bit different because they tend to make you want to think a lot more, and the more successful ones do tend to have more you're processing. Also, films are about things, and art is about reflecting on life. But I would put most of the value people get from films is an emotional experience, not an intellectual one. And yet, what we can track with metadata, that genre, that length, made in this country, is more intellectual than it is emotional. And so we get these anomalies, which I'm putting in inverted commas, because they're not anomalies emotionally, but they are intellectually. So Napoleon Dynamite's a great example. It's the film that breaks every recommendation engine. It, like, with all the data in the world, nobody can predict whether a new person will like Napoleon Dynamite or not. That is a famous, like, this breaks the algorithm, and that's great. Also, one of the most watched, most successful, highest rated films of all time is The Shawshank Redemption, which is a 3.5-hour brutal racist prison drama. That's not what you'd expect for the greatest film of all time, arguably, like, in the top 10, whatever. We don't have to go. We don't have to think of the exact ranking. And also, Frank Darabont later made another film from a short film, Stephen King short film, which is another brutal racist prison drama, in The Green Mile, which did nothing of the business. So it's not to say it's unpredictable, but it is to say that emotionally, I'd say The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption are wildly different, but intellectually, they're incredibly similar. And so we have to remember that the audience are after an emotional journey. They go to cinema to have a social and emotional experience. They want to feel something. You watch things. I mean, that's why things like The Office is watched far more than, say, Whiplash or something like that, because it's not better or worse. It's because it serves a different function.
Yeah.
And we can intellectualize it. As filmmakers, too much. Data can tell you, oh, you should do exactly this. Whereas if you take all that on advisory, but then fundamentally try and think of it as an emotional response to how people are feeling, and try and find your audience through emotions and your heart, I think that's a more successful route. Even though I'm the data guy, I don't think data is the answer. I think it gives you clues, but you have to do the actual painting yourself with emotions.
You said something interesting. You said, hey, you sit on the couch or whatever and decide what to watch, and hey, that's not available, let's watch something else. It's almost as if there's a question. The question that they are asking is what should we watch, but the answer, the actual question, the underlying question is, what do we want to feel tonight? Like, what's the
That's
emotion we want to
100% it.
experience?
That's it.
And yeah, that's an interesting paradigm shift for an independent filmmaker. Like, okay, not what do I want to create, but what do I want them to feel?
Yeah.
Or what is a
Where are they
feeling an
coming
audience
from? Where are they
wants?
going to?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what are they playing with? I mean, I listen to a lot of music, but I'm really not a music file. Like I don't even know the term for it. I say audiophile, but I don't know other audio
Yeah,
stuff.
okay.
I'm not, and I use music in a way that probably makes musicians feel horrible in the sense that I don't mind who the person is. And I don't know the history of them. I like that one makes me feel like this. And if Spotify tells me this next one will make me feel like that again or whatever, then fine. And I find that sometimes the most useful music to listen to when I'm working are video game soundtracks because they're designed to change how I'm feeling.
Ah,
Or movie soundtracks or whatever. I mean, Hans Zimmer gets some work done, but my God, it exhausts you. But the idea is there. I'm using music as not as an art form in itself, although I'm appreciating the art, but I'm using it as a function to change the way I'm feeling. It's kind of a drug in a sense. Like you might use caffeine or sugar or alcohol to change your state from nervous, tired, or whatever it might be. And most people use film in that way. Which
yeah.
is not to diminish what the film is, but we have to remember we're not normal. We want to make films. That's not normal. People love eating good food, but most people are not chefs. And being a chef is a horrible job, and so is a filmmaker. So the very fact that we've chosen to do this already puts us out on the weird end of weird.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's fine. You know, there's no problem with that. But we do have to remember that when we're engaging with the audience, they're not us. It's a different engagement.
Yeah.
And I remember I used to do before COVID, when I was in a lot more rooms with students, there was a really fun exercise where if I said something like this and I had sort of skeptical people looking at me, I'd be like, okay, we can do a simple experiment here with a raise of hands, right? So what I would do to them is I'd say, okay, how many of you would consider going to the cinema by yourself? As a secondary to going with someone else, obviously, but like, and some people would be like, almost all the hands would go up, as would mine. Yeah, exactly, and you guys would put your hands up as well. And sometimes people go, I prefer it because I can actually focus on the movie. Fine. Next question: how many of you would go bowling by yourself? There's a big laughter, and no one puts their hand up, and they're like, well, that's for sad losers. And I'm like, they're exactly the same. They're both individual experiences, not improved by somebody else standing next to you talking, and yet we both really we understand as you know. Most members of the public think those two things are the same, by the way. Most members of the public think that going to the cinema by yourself is for sad losers, the way that the three of us might say that about people who go bowling. But you know what? People who like bowling, they go by themselves sometimes as a secondary to go to someone else because we have a warped experience of who we are. And that's fine, but we have to remember that when we're engaging with the audience. And so where we can find common cause with the audience is how we want them to feel, because we're the ones changing the way they're feeling. We're the ones that take them for an hour and a half and take them on a journey, whether it's highs, lows, fears, inspiration, whatever it might be. And that's the root of what makes a film work and what will make a career work, and you connect with your audience. It's not metadata. It's not like you have to do 6% more fear. Like that may help that wider journey, but it is, you are an emotional controller, and people will use what you create for their own emotional journey.
Wow. I don't know
Okay,
that I have any.
Point number two. Oh, point number two. My summary of that is that I am a sad loser. Got it.
Yes, but you're among friends.
Perfect.
I'm the saddest loser because I actually love bowling alone and used to be, I started.
Wow. I found the Venn diagram of people. I didn't know people like you existed.
I started a bowling league when I was at college. I worked at the bowling alley there. I had 185 bowling average. I'm a nerd when it comes to bowling. So
I didn't know that, Darren. I did not know that you.
He kept it a secret. It's only now his dirty secret's been exposed. But no, it comes from passion. When you really love something, you're on the fringe of it. I mean, that's one of the. I work with a lot of charities, and a lot of the charity people who really care about their topic actually get quite angry when they engage with the public, because by definition, the charity worker is the person who cares most about cancer, human rights, whatever it would be. So imagine what it's like for them to walk around the world experience, knowing the truth of how horrible the thing they work on is, and most people going, yeah, you know, there's people dying in China because of that. Yeah, I'm busy now. Like, that's an incredibly angry experience. Now, it's not quite as visceral for artists or bowlers or whatever it might be, but it is kind of the same. You care way more than your audience, and they pay you to care more. The chef really cares, but then you sort of push it to one side because it's a bit, a bit too spicy. Like, that's kind of the deal.
Yeah. There, that's kind of an echo of your point about. I'm going to slaughter it, but it's something about um, sell to people that overvalue what you're selling. And
Love it.
Yeah, he's talked about that on the podcast a lot. This is so fascinating. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So the third one is a hard truth. And I actually think this is one of these hard truths that might sound depressing, but actually contains freedom. And losing the Shawshank Redemption earlier on, maybe being free is truly about accepting that you're still in prison. Anyway, filmmaking is not a business. I mean, there is an economy to it, and there are people who do make a living from it, and there are people who make a professional business out of it. But I tell you who they are. They are accountants and lawyers who don't discount their fees, so they know what they're doing. There are crew members that earn a living, that care about the work they're doing, but it is more of a job. But for more of the creatives and for the investors as well, it is not fundamentally a business because if you were to only care about returns, film would never be top of the list. There's just never a justification on finances alone. But that's not to say that it's not possible to make a lot of money. And it's also not to say that it doesn't matter. It's just you have to move it from thinking that some rich person who'd put money into, I don't know what rich people do with money, but like stocks, shares, property, whatever it be, or film, because you'll never win that fight, ever. And if they think that someone will put them out of their misery and tell them they're wrong halfway down the line. So not only can you never win that fight, if you think you're winning it, there's a Wile E. Coyote moment running off the cliff coming ahead of you. But if you move your mindset to nobody gets anything back from having a seat and their name on a seat on the opera, or from having a yacht or playing golf, or any of these other experiential things that rich people do because they have, they are cash rich, fun poor. And we realize we are fun rich, cash poor, and there is an interplay there. And they can have a lottery ticket that might be a safer lottery ticket than the actual lottery, probably is. The odds are probably a bit better. Then, although the return's not quite so good, then I think we move to a place of like, okay, we do need to do the best we can to make the most commercial decisions that are appropriate for our audience, especially if the investors want that. However, we have to realize that fundamentally what we are, the rarest thing we have is the journey, the passion, the art, the individual, like, please support me and support this film. That is our true value. And when we trick ourselves into thinking we are business people, I'm going to put on my business suit and I will prove that this will make money, it really won't. I promise you, like, the odds of making money in a film are poor and stacked against you. And there's no financial advisor in the world who'd say film makes sense. When they do say it makes sense, it's because there's a tax break or some sort of like dodgy thing. Not necessarily dodgy as in illegal, but like there's something going on that's not, I will make a film and I'll sell the film. Yeah, exactly.
Darren, we can edit that section out. Just cut that all out.
It's freedom. It's a good thing. You don't want to do it anyway. You've been institutionalized, you and everyone else, to thinking you have to sort of make a big business case. And the truth is there isn't really a business case. Even the studios, only 50% of their movies make money, and their annualized return on movies is terrible. Yeah. Disney makes money from T-shirts. They just have to make movies. They haven't really got a choice. And also they kind of enjoy it. It's never a smart decision to put money into film, but it's a fun decision and a unique decision and an artistic decision, a passionate. There are loads of good reasons. It's just not primarily money.
So that is so key to realize and accept and embrace, and then to sell, like to make that a selling point. And Darren and I just did a movie 2 years ago in South Africa, and it was from like you say, our investor was perhaps a cash-rich, fun-poor investor, and 90% of our job was to make the movie, and 10% was to let them have the experience of making a movie.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so good. That's such a good ratio. But that is 10%, that's probably 9.999% more than most filmmakers would, because they think, well, you're getting an investment. Give me the money, go away. And no. You took it seriously. You realized that 10% of your time, or however you allocate it, should be spent on that. But also, you got a huge amount of money for actually not that much work, but they got something unique and they got to support it. That's a great value exchange, and an honest one that you can actually deliver on. If your main proposition to them is you will make money, you can't control that, and you probably won't. You can say, I promise you, you'll be part of this journey and we'll do our best and you'll be involved. You can actually deliver on that. You can be an honest, straightforward filmmaker and not try and do something you don't know how to do, as in finances. Not you guys, but, filmmakers aren't generally the people who know how to make money, because they wouldn't be in film if they were.
That, just hearing you say that, man, it's refreshing and an amazing reminder. And as we have future meetings with investors, I always go in full transparent to say, guys, this is only for people that are just tired of losing money in other areas.
I love it.
Right.
I love it.
But but it's always like, okay, well, what is the model? How do we do this? And what is our chance of recoupment? And again, this is the pathway to recoupment, but this pathway is always changing and stuff like that. But you're right. If the sell is the experience of the fun, the sexiness, or the glamour of making a movie and coming on set and working with, like, getting to meet actors and then in promotions and going to the theater and getting your name on the chair, that you're right. That's 100% what we can guarantee.
And it's what you're into it for as well, like to varying degrees. I'm not saying every single filmmaker wants all those things, but we're already doing something pretty crazy and stupid and dedicating our lives and passion to this stuff. Why would we think that somebody else wouldn't do that from their point of view? Except that they're not giving their time necessarily, or their creative decisions. They're giving what they have, a resource in abundance, which is money. And you can deliver on that, and you can be, and so enrolling them emotionally in what you believe in is actually quite freeing, because you're like, oh, great, we're back on my terms now. Let me tell you why I think this story needs to get told. Wow. It's really empowering.
That's super interesting. It kind of goes against a lot of the things that I think and talk about, but I actually love it. And I'm looking to the past as like for some examples. And like, I just hosted an event for a bunch of producers. We have like a little networking group here in Utah, and I hosted an event at the Utah Film Studios up in Park City, and used that opportunity to bring a bunch of investors and entrepreneurs from outside the film industry. And the whole selling point was, come to this cool building and get a tour, because you'll never have another opportunity to do that. And that's why a dozen of them said, yeah, that sounds awesome. And the ones that didn't come messaged me the day after seeing the pictures in the email going, I'm so sad and mad that I missed this. And I'm like, oh, that's really it. It's not about, like you say, and believe me, as someone who does the numbers and the business plans and the budgets, there is no way to say this is going to have a higher IRR than your real estate investment that you're going to put the same amount of money into. So it can't be the selling point.
Yeah.
It's just not. And my personal journey with this was that before I did a blog, I was, as I said, trying to find a way into film to stay relevant, to be interesting to myself, and also that happened to use the skills I had that I felt were being underused. And so for the first 6-12 months, I was helping friends of mine write business plans. And I didn't know much about it. It wasn't that I was like, trust me, and they weren't paying me. It was more just, okay, let me go and find some comps. And every time I came back and I was like, oh, it turns out you shouldn't make this. And they were like, no, we want to. How do we do this? And I was like, no, I can't. Like that's a minus number. And when apparently North Korea, we don't know who, but whoever's hacked Sony, and they released all the emails and all of that stuff, I went through, they're on WikiLeaks at the moment, and I went through and read a lot of those emails that were made public, and I haven't published about them because I don't want to be an accessory, but I did read them to try, and it was a really fascinating insight. By that point, I'd done some stuff with studios and stuff, but not a huge amount, and certainly you never know what you're being told. Is it true? And whereas now we had the emails, and we probably had better sight than any individuals because you had multiple people's emails, so you could see almost, there was no secrets, but there were side conversations going on. And on the film Jobs, the Steve Jobs film that ended up having Michael Fassbender, there's a fascinating back and forth where they're saying, okay, let's do the comp analysis, the green light model, they call it, to prove it will make money. And they're like, yeah, it won't. And then people come back and go, yeah, I want to make it. And they're like, and I think when someone suggests Michael Fassbender or someone else says, I literally don't know who that is. and yet they still made it, and it still did pretty much what the comps said on the green light model. So I realized that was a much larger conversation of the same conversation I was having 10 years before in the independent world, where my friends were like, I want to make this, I think it's sensible, can you prove it's sensible? Coming back saying it's not sensible, and they go, well, we're going to do it anyway. And I'm glad they did. I liked that movie. I thought it was good. It was good casting. And so, I don't know if Sony made or lost money on that one. I can't remember. But frankly, I don't care because it exists and I enjoyed it. But they were trying to do the same thing everyone's trying to do, which is I have a passion. It's logical to me. It must be factually logical. It's not. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. I think that's how good things get made. I don't think good things get made logically.
So here's
And actually,
That's freeing.
yeah.
That's freeing.
Yeah, it should feel freeing because you're not good at it anyway. So let go of it.
Yeah, here's a guy. As a filmmaker, I can guarantee you, I don't know how to make money. So why would I go?
True.
Why would I go to a wealthy, rich investor and tell them I know how to make you money? That's a bad idea. No,
That's such a good way of putting it. You go into their mansion and you're like, "You should listen to me, son, about money."
Yeah, right.
No.
I mean, they just pat me on the head and go, "Who do you think you are?" Yeah. But
whereas you can get a building,
I can make a movie.
You know, you can call someone and get someone and then put on some nibbles, put on some movies, get actress friend of ours down, an actor friend, whatever. You can do all that stuff without even thinking. Like the way you said, we set up these networking things. It takes effort, but you have access and knowledge. And for them, they're like, oh, wow. So do a trade, you know?
Yeah, that's cool.
So here's you can give a short answer to this if you want, but do you think there's an opportunity there for some entrepreneurial and enterprising young filmmaker to say, I actually want to crack that financial bit, or is it kind of a losing battle?
It's a really good question. I'd say that I see patterns now of the same kinds of people coming into the film industry. It happened a lot during the financial crisis, where a lot of them were made redundant and decided, but still had some cash, and they were like, "Oh, now I'm going to finally follow my dreams." And at various times, you get people who have come from money, and I don't mean like they were wealthy growing up necessarily. I mean that they have made money, let's say Wall Street or whatever, and they come into film because they want to bring together their passion and making money. They tend to go down to one of two routes. One, they look at all of the film world, they try and understand all the data, and then they're like, but wait, there's nothing there. There's no money to be made. I don't understand. It's not predictable. And then they leave. They're like, well, no, that's terrible. I'm not going to do that. Or they go completely native and they go, and I see them sort of slightly sort of starry-eyed because they're like, this is the best script ever. And you're like, you've lost all objectivity. You can choose to, you kind of need to deal with the cognitive dissonance. You're going to make a bad decision because you want to, but all your training has told you otherwise. And I get engaged quite often by investors who are they feel like they're stupid and they can't understand it, or they don't have the right data, or it's being hidden from them. I'm like, no, your understanding was correct. You shouldn't do this, but you probably will anyway. And that is a really fascinating journey because they're not used to that. They're used to sitting in front of their Bloomberg machine and working it out, and then also moving on, or not being emotionally connected. They're trying to buy oil futures, or whatever, and it doesn't turn out there's a good arbitrage. So they move on to something else because they didn't care about oil in the first place. They cared about money. But in film, they find that model for them breaks. So I don't think there is a formula. And I think also if there were, I mean, the closest way I can see to a formula that has existed would be something like the Marvel films, where they did a terrific job in working out what the formula was for those kinds of films, and they pumped them out. And A, the formula was make them good, and B, it burnt itself out to the point where even me as a big fan got saturated, and I haven't seen some of the more recent ones, and I'm not bothered. And I'm sure they're great. Like, and this isn't to say they got bad. It's art. You know, the job of business is to develop something once, patent it, and make a billion of them and keep making them. It's a system. The job of art is to destroy everything all the time. So the business of art is to sustainably destroy stuff. And that's really hard to do. And without wanting to cast too much shade on people, I've seen, over the last month, I've seen two of the films I've seen in the cinema. One was a new film, and one was not a re-release, like a screening of a classic film, because there's cinemas near me that do that. And they're both from the same filmmaker. One was The Godfather Part 2, and the other was Megalopolis. Now, that is one of the best films of all time, and the other one is not. I shall be kind. But my point is that even someone that talented can make something that not the best film of all time. And so there isn't a formula. Even Marvel can end up having mistakes, or, you know, so there isn't a formula. There's just hard work and a bit of luck and fortune and fun along the way. I don't know. That's what we should really be hoping for.
Yeah.
That is very enlightening. I hope people actually listen to that.
I've got one data point on this point
nice.
before I move on to my fourth and final one, which I thought was really fun. So the journey of this is that Bruce Nash, who runs the Numbers website, and I were engaged by the American film market. Every year before COVID, we would write 3 or 4 articles, and they were amazing. They said, look, you can write anything you want. Just, we'll give you a little bit of money. Go and do some research. So long as it would be interesting to independent filmmakers and producers, who's the AFM's core audience, we don't mind. Just go do the work and we'll put it on our newsletter, and great. So we were very lucky. And so one of the times we went away and researched the correlation between the amount of money a producer's film has made and their likelihood of making another film. So basically, if you made a load of money with your first film, were you more likely to make a second film or not? So there's a correlation between experience and profitability. And we ran all the numbers, and it was quite detailed profitable because it was using comp analysis and all sorts of stuff like that. So we're fairly confident that we actually got really profit, not just did well at the box office. And we found almost no correlation, a slight minus correlation. And I went back to the AFM. I was like, we kind of proved that experience means nothing in film producing. If anything, it might hurt. Are you okay with that? And the AFM were like, great. We've done this good conversation point, good for our marketing. But we thought about it for a while before we published it to make sure it was correct. And it's interesting. It makes perfect sense. Because if you lose a load of money, you don't get your artistic license revoked. You can still make films because you were never making them based on the profitability in the first place. You were based on your chutzpah and your hard work. And like very, very few filmmakers have repeat investors. And so actually the business isn't about making money. The business is about convincing people in the short term that you might make money, which is close to like a scam. And I'm not suggesting it is, but it's more about confidence than it is about accuracy. Because what happens if you're wrong? You just move on to somebody else. What happens if you're right? They've had their fun. They probably don't want to invest. If you win the lottery, you don't go and put all that money on lottery tickets. You're like, I'm taking that out, and that Vegas gets you winning by making you keep playing however well you're doing. So actually the correlation, being a good, successful film producer has got nothing to do with making money. And that's fine, so long as that's what you tell people. As long as that adds up with the people that are giving you money, know that that's actually not what your business is.
That's a big idea that I'm going to need to process, I think, for a little while.
It's a good idea. It just, you have to go through bleakness and come out the other side. It's a bit existential. But actually, as I said, we're not very good at it. We don't like it anyway. And I don't know who sold us this myth. It's like filmmakers are wearing like a small child wearing a big suit, holding, like in Rugrats, holding a briefcase going business, business, business. We don't know how to do business. And we're very bad at it as a class when you look back at the returns. So get that off, go back to the art school and do the beautiful painting that everybody wants. And you're like, oh, great. That's actually who I was all along.
Yeah. It is interesting. Yeah, it is interesting to process because those conversations are still coming up on like, how do we mitigate those risks and where do we set the budget up? And maybe in processing, I have to say, okay, well, ultimately, let's define the goal. And if the goal is to make money, I'm probably not the guy to have that conversation with you anymore. Right? Let me introduce you to my realtor friend. But if the goal is to make a film, I'm the best choice around for this particular.
That's exactly it. I couldn't express it better myself. And you are the best choice for your type of film. And you can do that honestly. You can do it well. And they're backing you for being you. They're not backing you for using the right three sentences or words, or because you mentioned Napoleon Dynamite and Paranormal Activity. It's an ethical, safe place to be, and it uses your strengths and who you are as a person.
Yeah, I feel more ethical that way than having the conversation of, well, they get tax rebates and they get this and that, and if we do this, then it'll land. We all know that's lightning in a bottle.
And do all that stuff, definitely, as a secondary thing,
100%.
but don't lean on that. And if you think that's the reason they're giving you money, don't take the money. It's not going to go well. I'm not even saying it's wrong to do it. I'm saying it'll go badly because they'll realize, or someone will tell them. So my last one is something that we've actually touched on a little bit, but I think audience is the most important thing. And as I said before, audience can mean any gatekeeper. So let's say I've got data to prove that something isn't true, but if all of your sales agents believe it to be true, it's effectively true for you because you're dealing with those people. But putting those people aside for one moment, when I'm using audience in this particular final point is about the people who will watch your movie. And they are the people who, with all the expectations that you'll create from the title, the poster, maybe the trailer, but certainly the casting, anything they see before they make that choice, they are the people that you have a psychic, emotional, creative link with. And so you need to know who they are, not in a data sharing way, but like, who is this movie for? What do they expect? And how can I surprise them in a way that feels satisfying? How can I give them something that they go, oh, wow. And I think about that a lot with food, because I'm not a bad chef, but I'm not a chef. Like, I'm not a bad cook. I can cook a little bit, but I certainly can't do anything that when I go to restaurants and there's a nice restaurant, I'm like, wow, how did they even do this? They can give me the list of ingredients, but it says like fish, spice, salt. I'm like, I don't know. But like, they have some artistry with it, but they do have a connection with me in the sense that I've gone to a certain type of restaurant that has a certain price point and a certain flavor profile, or a country in the world it's from, or it's in a certain location as well. Like, is it in Times Square, or is it, in Chinatown or whatever? And with all of that in mind, they've then done a great job to deliver. And the ones I'll go back to are the ones that delight me and do something different, but they don't have to do something dramatically flashy. But they need to have a sense of who I am. Otherwise, I'm just not going to turn up.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the audience here. And so when we say to people, who's this for? The answer most people give reflexively is, it's for everyone, and you're like, okay, fine. But how many things that you do really your cousin does, your partner does? Not really, right? So understanding who the audience are, and then also trying to meet those people, whether it is, as I said, Patreon, Substack, anything that's in the modern world, or even just reading their reviews. I mean, a good exercise, if you're a screenwriter, everyone says you should read, hundreds of real screenplays. That's true. If you're a filmmaker, you should read hundreds or maybe thousands of reviews. Now, reviewers are still weird people because they're sitting there typing their thoughts out for the public. I find that really weird. I don't do that. But still, if you're on Letterboxd and you read and you see what lists the films you're talking about appear in, you start to understand, what did they think? How are they perceiving it? And the more you can understand that, then you can play. You're like, okay, so now and it goes back to what we were saying about investors. Like, you invite a load of investors to come to a film studio, and you're like, this is one night only, a live event, and you're going to meet these people. You're like, okay, I think I know what they're excited by. And then the feedback you get on the day, who said yes, who said no, who turned up, who called you the next day saying, like, how can I come to the next one? You're knowing your audience. You're not doing it in a vacuum. I think spending any amount of time doing that is like being in the gym getting ready for a fight. You are preparing yourself. You know which muscles to use. You know how to respond to stuff and when to be light on your feet, when to be powerful. And then by the time you're actually ready to have that engagement with the audience, you kind of understand them and you can challenge them. I mean, I went to see some stand-up comedy last night, and he was very angry with the audience in a way that was very funny, but he clearly understood that we were there for that. It wasn't a problem. Yeah. But another comedian could have been really sycophantic and really supportive of us, and we wouldn't have felt seen. We wouldn't have felt understood. And so it's not about serving your audience. It's not about doing what they want. It's not about agreeing with them even. It's about getting them. And you only do that through interactions in some way, even if they're passive, parasocial kind of things.
I've been taking notes, so
we've talked a lot. Yeah. We've talked a lot on this podcast. This is we're on our 6th month almost. Is that right? Mm-hmm. But it started out as how to build an audience as an independent filmmaker. And you've encapsulated what the whole arc of the podcast. If this were a story,
if I finished it now, is this the end? Oh, sorry, you can't do any more now. Yeah, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Roll credits
narratively speaking.
Roll credits. That's the denouement. We're ready to.
Sorry. I know, we're in an industry with sequels. It's fine. Just keep going.
Sequel. That's
and
right.
prequels and reboots. We've got plenty.
Yeah. Very, very insightful. Very great content or comments. Thank you.
I think it's given me a very different view on what's next for us, because we're kind of at this point where we've released these 2 movies. We haven't been on set in a year. At least I haven't, not on a feature film set of a film that we're producing and directing and that Garrett's written or anything like that. But as we step into the flywheel again, as it goes to the next rotation of, okay, we're going into development and pitching and fundraising. And I think these are really insightful principles to kind of really look at, like, take a hard look at ourselves and go, where are we at on this? Where are we at on this? And where should we spend some time so it's not just in the pitch deck or the sizzle reel or, but really kind of thinking through all of these points that you brought up, because yeah, some of them I almost feel attacked, and some, which is a good thing. I actually am really grateful for that, because if you're only ever getting reinforcement for the way you already think, you're never going to grow, you're never going to expand, you're never going to progress. And I really value those things. And so, yeah, it means taking the hard pill and swallowing it anyway and going, okay, well, how does it feel now that I've done that? So I don't know that I have like follow-up questions. I have a lot to process here, but I'm so grateful for it. So
No, I'm more than happy. And I think a lot of this is about just honesty with yourself. And it's a lot of it is reflective of the way life is. You know, you find a partner not by finding the sexiest person. You find the person that match makes best with you. And sometimes that's about you're both amazing at or have the same passion for X. Sometimes it's that you're both bad at Y or whatever, or even that you're complementary and one of you tidies up and the other one's messy. Whatever it is, it's matchmaking, not about a race to the thing. And the film industry itself is so full of, I mean, it is the essence of the film industry is storytellers telling stories about how they tell stories. The idea that there's any literal truth in any of it, sorry, there is emotional truth, but like the idea that there is objective facts and stats is not true. It's just, that's just a story. Like what I do is storytelling. It's accurate. I don't make anything up. But even then, there is no such thing as there's no such thing as a photo that doesn't have a perspective. There's no such thing as a graph that doesn't have a perspective or a certain criteria to it that sort of narrows it down. And I think it is about being honest to yourself and like following your journey with it. And the film industry is full of so many things that are just not true that we tell each other. And I've been on a mission to try and find more of them. And usually the truth is not that they're completely false, but usually that they're true in a useless way. So I'll give you an example. So I really like to have questions from my readers because there's so many different perspectives, and people, some of the best ideas I've ever written about have come from other people. And John August, the filmmaker, the writer and the podcaster, he sometimes sends me these sort of random questions, which is always great because he's always thinking differently. But there was a question he asked me, and he's been in the industry for 20 years or so. I mean, he wrote Go, and he wrote the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Johnny Depp and Charlie's Angels, and more recently Aladdin, things like that. He's written some amazing films, but he's been around for a long time, and he's also been a podcaster for a long time. I haven't been nearly as successful, around for nearly as long. However, I've been in the industry, and he asked me a question a few years ago that he hadn't considered before, and I hadn't either. But both of us had told people this truth about film, and he just asked if it was true. And it took me under a day to find out it wasn't true. He said to me, "Is that rule of 1 page of script equaling 1 minute of screen time true?" And I went, "Oh, I don't know. I've told everyone because I've read it. It's a truth. Everyone knows this is true." And I was like, actually, that's not hard to find out. Like, it took a bit of work, but I can't remember how many, hundreds of screenplays. I looked at the running time. I made sure they were the same format. I looked at the correlation, and it's not really true. It's kind of true, as in it's not massively out, but it's true to the same way you can say, should you look left and right before you cross the road? The answer is, in the big sense, no, because mostly there's not a car there. But every single time you stand there, you should, because the consequences are really important. And people use it like it's gospel. And the truth is, it's vaguely true, but not practical. And it took John decades to realize it. And then it took me also decades to realize it. And it took a day to figure out. And the film industry is littered with things that people are being, and John was telling me, people are using shorter words in their script because it's 2 pages too long. And he's like, this is not changing the screen running time, but I can't use disproportionately in the description because it's, and he said that, and he didn't give specific examples, but he said he has done this on films for major studios. How do I make this shorter without making it short? What a waste of time, energy, talent. What an empty thing because of this rule that everyone has just accepted. And nobody said, is it true? Anyone could have figured it out. And so I think the industry is full of stuff like that. I'm trying to uncover more of them, but there is a kind of like, oh my God, Emperor's New Clothes everywhere. So as a side note, if any of you readers have any, and listeners have any suggestions, get them to me because I'll go and check them out if I can. Yeah, but it really reminded me that just because everyone says it, just because I've said it, just because I've read it everywhere and I've never heard a dissenting voice, doesn't mean it's true.
I love that.
So what is the actual number? If it's not 1 minute per page.
There isn't a number. There's a sort of range. There's a really beautiful graph
Yeah.
that shows the sort of, as it gets longer, there is a sort of gradation. There is a space. Obviously, it's around a minute a page. Otherwise, it wouldn't. If it was 3, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
As a, in the same way that most stereotypes are based on some truth. Otherwise, they wouldn't be stereotypes. But you shouldn't, when you meet somebody, respond to them entirely based on the stereotype, because first of all, that's racist, but also, or whatever it might be, but it's also dismissing them as a unique person, and maybe they have 8 of the 9 traits that you think they might, but not the 9th. It's the same thing here. It's largely true, but not useful, because you can have a bit that says Lord of the Rings, the 2 armies face each other across the thing and fight to the death. And then you can have a fast talking, like interrogation scene between 2 comedic people in one room.
Yeah.
And those are not the same thing. They're just not.
Amazing. My goodness. Well, Stephen, you've given us such a gift of your time and your expertise in all this research. I don't know if you have any thoughts that you want to leave us with, or Garrett, if you have any other follow-up questions, but we do want to be respectful of your time. It's later there than it is here, and you probably have dinner to attend to, but any kind of parting thoughts or anything that you want to tell our audience as they're going out into this crazy world of trying to get films made?
I think the thing is, we've chosen to do this. Like, even myself, like I identify as a filmmaker. I'm in the film industry. What I'm doing with stats is no crazier than people making films. Like, it doesn't make any sense, doesn't make any money, but at the same time, it makes me happy. And so I think there's a certain amount of, some filmmakers need to work harder, but most filmmakers need to accept more where they are, and that's fine. You don't have to pretend to be something you're not. You still have to work hard, and the odds are not in your favor, but that doesn't matter. We all have the option to go and find whatever the lazy career that would suit our skills are. Sometimes it might be an accountant, a lawyer, whatever, the family business, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we all know what the backup career is, because we've been asked it by our parents for 30 years until they gave up. But like, we've already chosen to let go of that, so just embrace that. Like, you're on the slide going down. You might as well put your hands in the air and go, wee, because it's a bit late not to. And I think there's a certain amount of acceptance and love that you can do for yourself and your passion, and be like, you know what? I'm living a life of passion. And I can guarantee you, the rich people I know are jealous of us, even though they have better food and they have certainty of their home. And like, I'm not suggesting we are better off overall, but I can tell you that they're jealous of us in the same way we're jealous of them, perhaps. But accept the journey you've taken and love it, and know that that's your strength, not a weakness.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I feel edified. I feel like this episode, selfishly, is for me.
Good.
But I cannot wait to share it with our audience. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on there. Thank you for all the work you do as well. These podcasts don't make themselves. And as all the listeners know, there's a huge amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, and that's what the community is. And I think it's wonderful. So yeah, thank you both for inviting me and making me feel so well.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
now, Stephen, we definitely want to tell people where they can find you online, where they can read your writing, and please tell us about this new horror report that you just released, I think a week or 2 ago.
Yeah, very recently. Yeah, so most of my stuff is at stephenfollows.com, which is Stephen with a PH, but you can Google it. And also, my work is about the work more than anything else. So if there's a topic you want to go and have a look at, then Google it, and hopefully I'll be up there. The horror report is a huge, 400 pages. Take me a year or so, and part-time, not the only thing I'm doing, but it's a big investigation to all horror films ever made through the lens of data. And it's everything from the making, financing, the stories, the serial killers, the audience, all that sort of stuff. So it's so extremely what it is, that you either have already decided you want this and I'm annoyed I haven't told you the website, or you already think I'm wasting your time. So I don't need to sell it. I just need to tell you it exists. So horrormoviereport.com. It is a data analysis of all horror films ever. It is huge. If you want it, it's there. And it'll help you write a business plan. It'll help you pick a film festival. It'll tell you all about things. If it's not for you, thank you for bearing with me for the last 60 seconds of this little ad.
I cannot wait to use it to prove that my horror comedy is going to make money.
Good. Use it any way you'd like, and most importantly, remember it's passion that's going to make it work. My graphs will help, but at the end of the day, you're the one doing it.
Brilliantly said.
So great.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was great to finally meet you and have a conversation with you. I look forward to a future where we can do that, maybe even in person if I'm ever out there.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
All right. Thanks,
Thank you so much, everyone. All right, all the best. Bye.
Okay, be well.
Hey, indie filmmakers and movie lovers. This show is sponsored by Purdy Distribution. Since 2011, they've been bringing incredible independent films to theaters, like Garrett Batty's The Saratov Approach, T.C. Christensen's Love Kennedy, and McLean Nelson's Once I Was a Beehive. They've worked with top-notch directors like Mitch Davis and Mark Goodman, specializing in family, faith-based, and funny films. This year alone, they've released hits with JK Studios like Go West and Villains Inc., and have even branched out internationally with films shot in South Africa and Japan. Purdy Distribution works closely with indie filmmakers, designing personalized distribution plans, whether it's a theatrical release or straight to streaming on platforms like Amazon, iTunes, Google, and more. If you have a PG or PG-13 film ready for the world, think about reaching out to Purdy Distribution. They're approachable and knowledgeable, ready to help you visualize your film's distribution. Even if your film isn't fully polished, they can offer valuable guidance. Plus, if you need that crucial distribution piece for investor packages, Purdy Distribution can provide a letter of intent to distribute, helping you secure funding without locking you into a contract. Mark your calendars for Purdy Distribution's upcoming releases: Tokyo Cowboy on August 30th, the digital release of Thabo and the Rhino Case on September 1st, Faith of Angels in theaters on September 12th, Villains Inc. on Amazon and iTunes on October 1st, and The Carpenter on November 1st. To stay updated on these releases and more, sign up for their newsletter at purdydistribution.com. That's P-U-R-D-I-E distribution.com. Now, back to the show.
Darren, what a great guest. How you feeling?
Oh my gosh, I took notes the whole time, and I know, like, I edit this podcast, so I very easily could have been doing that after the show, but I was just enamored with everything he was saying, the quotes, the one-liners, the insights. I think he's just got such a different perspective into our industry because of the work he's doing, diving into data and looking at what's true. And that to me is like my biggest takeaway. Like, I want to be in alignment with what is true. There's actually a scripture that is like one of my favorites. It says that truth is a knowledge of things as they are, as they were, and as they are to come. And that really felt like what we were doing here. Like, what's really true about the industry and what should we do about it if we don't know that that truth exists, or if we're not currently operating in alignment with that truth?
Yeah. I agree. And there was some solid information and a great paradigm shift on some things. Specifically with that, filmmaking is not business, but there's value beyond money. So that's what we're selling, that experience, both to an audience and to an investor. What a great thought to process, especially with some of our upcoming meetings, as we go into those. And it's getting harder and harder to get in front of an investor and raise more money for a movie and say, these movies have done well, these have not. I've been a part of these that have done well. I've been a part of these that have flopped. Do you want to take a chance? And it's a harder question, I think, to ask than, hey, I've made 8 films. I've filmed in 30 different countries across the world. I bring a crew. We all have a great time. And at the end of production, we put together a film, and I can guarantee that's a fun experience.
Yeah. Well, it's almost leaning into the thing that only you can do. Like, if you want to be a part of the Garrett Batty experience, this is the film. Yeah. There's no other opportunity to do that. I mean, honestly, if you're talking about how he was, like, the different audiences you experience along the path of getting a movie made, I was an audience at one point for you. You're like, hey, do you want to do a Garrett Batty movie? You want to produce The Carpenter? And I said, absolutely. Before I even knew what the movie was, because I knew I wanted that experience to work with you. It turned out to be incredible and amazing and life-changing because we got all these different experiences from it. But I even think about Wayne, our producer, executive producer on Faith of Angels, and he was lit up by being able to call action and cut one day on set. When would he ever be able to even pay to do that? You can't buy a ticket to call action and cut on a set unless you're the executive producer of the film and got in that way. So it was a
I think
frame.
So then, as an independent filmmaker, as a first-time independent filmmaker, there's the acceptance of like, hey, I am creating. I mean, ultimately, Hollywood is creating an amusement park, right? I'm creating an amusement park. As a first-time filmmaker, I might be creating. I'll have the bouncy house. I can provide a bouncy house. You bring everybody over, we're gonna have a good time. I can guarantee that. Right now that we've done this over and over and over, it's like no. Now we're building, the roller coaster. Which metaphor works on a lot of different ways. But you come, you participate, and nobody ever at the end of a day at Disneyland goes, "I didn't make my money back." They go, "Oh man, that was worth it. That was a memory well made," and yeah, let's do it again.
That is a really good analogy, I think. And I still am leaning towards, yes, we still have a responsibility to be good stewards of investors' money. But as we're pitching the project, maybe it's a reframe there to say, this is what you're really getting. And yes, we're going to do everything we can to return an investment to you. But you need to be weighing this not in terms of return on investment or average rate of return over the next 3 years, but really thinking about, do I value this experience enough to give you this much money? And that probably needs to take more precedence in the way we pitch these things, which is so interesting because I even told you, don't pitch a creative project. You need to speak investor. You need to talk in terms of ROI and IRR and all these different business and investor terms. I'm questioning how true that is now. I mean, it worked for Faith of Angels, but I think it's definitely an interesting thing to think through.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I think there still has to be that vernacular. You have to be able to communicate in investor speak, but he's helped me see the value of what we have to offer is not, as we know, is not ever going to compete with how they've already made their money.
Mm-hmm.
An investor is never going to go, oh, I'm making 25% in real estate. Will film compete with that? No, it never, ever, ever, ever will. And if it does, and you take credit for that in and itself is a mistake. If you do hit a Napoleon Dynamite and you go, see what we did? Nope, you didn't. So
yeah. Oh man, lots to process. I loved that conversation though. It was how cool of Stephen to take the time to do that with us. I know we're going long today, but I'm okay with it. So let's talk about The Carpenter. We are recording this on Tuesday, November 5th, election day of all days. And we just had our opening weekend of The Carpenter. So man, you're finally back at home. You've been remote the last 2 or 3 episodes because you've been premiering the movie all over the place. Tell us about how you're feeling and how it's going.
Okay, well, yes. So The Carpenter, again, we set out to hit the goal of 600 screens, top 10 box office. We've done everything we can to do that goal, knowing that there's always going to be variables, these last minute changes, other films releasing, whatever it is, or just, audience reception of the movie, whatever it is. But so it's so nice to be home and to look at the numbers. I just typed in Box Office Mojo, and for the first time, Carpenter popped up on latest dailies. I've never seen one of our movies without having to click on it, like it's on the homepage, which is kind of cool. So yes, we ended up opening on 500 screens, not making the top 10. But as far as how I'm feeling, I feel really good, especially after that conversation with Stephen. It's like the experience that the Krebs family wanted and paid for. I didn't pitch them an idea of here's how to make money in film. They came and said, we want to make a film. And I can say we delivered that beyond their wildest dreams. And evidence of that is that each one of these red carpet premieres, they had their entire family, like all the kids and the grandkids, and everyone is there walking the red carpet, smiling the entire time, whether we were in San Diego or Atlanta or Nashville or or Dallas or Salt Lake, they were all there. This was their experience. This was their trip to Disneyland. And I mean, they even said, hey, we're not in this for the business. Like, this is what we want. We want to create this experience as a family. And so, yeah, at the end of the day, I think that we had that goal to get us to where we, to keep us going on that. And we delivered what they wanted.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So a quick trip into the box office report for this last weekend. 14 new movies came out.
I've never seen anything like this, Darren.
It's pretty nuts. Three of those in the top 10, 5 of them in the top 13, most of them in the top 25. Like, a lot of movies came out this weekend. Go ahead.
Not only that, the number one new release is number 5 in the top 10. Like, that's crazy. That the number one wide release didn't even break. I mean, it broke number 5.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it's kind of like what I said last episode. I was really hoping for, here to do 50 million plus, but it did 5. And so number 1 was a 25 or $26 million take, which meant that the number 10 spot, Beetlejuice, highest we've seen, $2 million for the number 10 spot.
Right.
So even if we killed it and had a $2,000 or even $3,000 dollar per screen average, we would have only hit 1.5. And
right,
we wouldn't have been in the top 10. So I think, again, just to reiterate, for independent filmmakers, if you're thinking strategically, you might want to think about releasing your indie movie the same weekend as a big studio movie, because the number 10 spot is going to be a lower target to hit.
It's all there. I mean, the goal is there. There's great reason I mean, the data is there to say that these models work. And it certainly formed and fashioned and defined our approach to releasing this movie, which was great. I think that if we were to just say, oh, we're going to release it and see what it does or see how many, we wouldn't be at 500 screens. We wouldn't be, we wouldn't have had this podcast. So yeah, I don't think you go aimlessly. I think you have a goal, have a North Star, and accept the results, I guess.
Yeah, so talking about the results, we came in the number 23 film, 500 screens, $137,000 for a per screen average of $275. So, as we've talked about a lot on this show, our kind of target was 2,000 per screen average. So we missed it. Do you have any thoughts on that? How that played out?
No, I mean, I would have loved for it to reach the goal, or to have a better turnout for the film. But yeah, I mean, and maybe that just needs to be end of statement. I would have loved for it to do better for the people involved, for the talent and cast and crew and everybody involved in the Krebs family. It softens it that wasn't ever their goal. Like, their intention was to never even release this movie, and in fact, for some reason, that was kind of part of their talking points to media. I don't know how much that helped or hurt. I do think that there is a responsibility of, hey, distributor did a good job of getting it on 500 screens.
Yeah.
The reviews for the movie. Yeah. I think we need to improve on our it's hard, on our marketing. With each film, it's different. Nobody's ever marketed that particular film before, and so it's trying to figure out what levers to pull in order to get people to get off their couch and go see a movie. Yeah, I don't know. And it's interesting that there's only one other faith-based film in release right now, which is White Bird. And that was number 19. Am I accurate on that? It's definitely a time for like horror movies, and yeah, I mean, Godzilla -1 was re-released.
Yeah, I don't know if you call Conclave a religious movie or not.
I saw that movie. It's good. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it was a faith-based film. I wouldn't categorize it. That was more of
Yeah,
a
it's the topic or subject
really good
matter
drama.
is faith, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to watch from the outside on this one, not being as involved. And again, I would have hoped it would do better as well, but
What was
every
your
movie's
perception from the outside?
well, I think it just highlights how these two movies were very different in as far as what the goal was. The goal for the Krebs was a wide release. And it wasn't necessarily to make the most money or to have the most people see it, but it was to have a wide release. They wanted to be able to say, this movie's available everywhere and everyone who wants to can go see it. And that means 500-600 screens, which we talked about this whole podcast. And so, if you're getting into it, like, yeah, we oversaturated or oversupplied the market based on demand. And so would it have been better to do it on 100 or 200 screens? Well, no, because that's not what the outcome was. The outcome was 500-600 screens we delivered. And yeah, then it's the marketing of how do we get at that point, if you have 500 screens, you really need like whatever that is. I don't do public math. So if you do 500 times 200 people, which would be a 2,000 per screen average, how do you get 100,000 people to go out and see your movie? Well, we had about 13,000 people see the movie over that weekend. Now, that is amazing. And we've had more than 60,000 people have seen Faith of Angels. That's bigger than anything I've ever been a part of, as far as a release of a product or an offer to a marketplace. So it's amazing. And I think we'll be around the same amount of people seeing The Carpenter. So now we kind of know what we're capable of with the current understanding and learning and team, and we can make choices and changes and adjustments for the next one to aim for how do we get 100,000 or 250,000 or 500,000 people to a theater. That's going to require a lot more audience and a lot more marketing and a lot more effective marketing so that we can deliver that result.
I had a cool experience. Well, I don't know. It's kind of a reminder, as you're talking about having people see the film, and I was in Dallas or one of these cities, and I was walking down the theater. I had gone to a different theater to watch Conclave. I was watching Conclave in the afternoon prior to the screening, and walked down the hallway and was just kind of there as a customer. And I think I had my popcorn or my ticket or whatever, and walked past a bank of posters and was that, there's that movie, there's Carpenter, there's that movie. And I just kind of kept walking. And then it hit me like, no, stop. Like, stop and appreciate what you just saw. Like, that's the movie you guys made, and it's a poster and it's being advertised. We weren't doing a screening there. We weren't doing a big event, but they were promoting the movie. And I think that's, maybe that qualifies as the value beyond money moment. We're like, that's cool. That's what we wanted. That's what the family wanted. And we know how to give it to them now. For any investor that we talk to, anybody that we talk to, a cast member, and say, hey, this is what we're offering. This is what we're capable of. Potentially more as far as experience goes.
Yeah. Anytime I've told people that Faith of Angels released on 375 screens, that Carpenter came out on 500 screens, their reaction is the same every time. It's mind blown emoji, right? It's like, oh my gosh, that's incredible that you guys did that. And again, maybe that is or isn't or should or shouldn't be the goal, but like the fact that happened, that there's enough demand from that audience of theater owners and theater bookers to want our movie, that says a lot about the quality of the film that we made. And yeah, it's about figuring out how do we unlock and grow this audience so that we can, in effect, get more people out into a theater opening weekend.
Yeah. Well, Darren, this has been a fun journey. I mean, we started out the podcast with Carpenter and saying this is what we're going to do. And thank you to our audience for going on this journey with us. So what's next? We haven't talked a lot about that. Do we need to take a break, or what's next? What do we want to do?
I definitely want to hear from the audience. Like, if you've been listening this entire time, this is episode 24. Like, what are your thoughts, and what would you? Are there any lingering questions or anything that we should cover as far as distribution and releasing the films? I think we now start pivoting toward, what does maybe a season 2 look like? And that's covering the development of the next project, the financing and pitching and all of that aspect. Maybe that's season 2, and season 3 covers production and post-production or something like that. That's kind of how I'm trying to think of it. Nice 3X structure for the film nerds out there. I don't know. It feels like both of us have some work that we're diving into and setting up the next project or projects. And so we definitely should be covering that the same way that we've been covering the distribution.
I think that I would love that. I'd love to start our second episode or second season on developing. You and I both have meetings this week with potential investors. AFM is happening right now, and there are conversations about scripts that have been sent my way and what we're going to do next. And I'd love to hear from an audience. Is there interest in that? I love recording this podcast with you. I love talking about it. We don't have a film to release, so we'd have to come up with something that would be interesting to our audience.
Yeah.
So let us hear it.
Okay. Exciting times ahead. And please, if you've made it this far in this episode, you need to go share it with everyone you know, because Stephen Follows delivered today. And I think it's the least we can do to help this episode reach as many filmmakers as possible. There's so much gold in this episode. So thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Garrett, this has been a fun journey. And now we start another one.
Okay, man. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Truly Independent. To join us on the journey, be notified of new episodes and screenings, and ask us questions about today's episode, head over to 3coinpro.com/podcast and put in your name and an email address. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and be sure to share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week. Our intro and outro music is Election Time by Kjartan Abel.